It's interesting, right? Like this past weekend, we talk about the storm of in the Sea of Galilee. And then yesterday, I'm not sure how many of you are affected by the tornado warnings, but it was crazy. As just listening to the radio, this warning came on. It's like, go grab shelter. And I know some of my family members went into the basement. And I don't know if anybody, hopefully nobody died from the tornado and things yesterday. Driving on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and just the winds and the rains, and it was crazy. So I pulled over and was able to find shelter in the gas station there, just waiting for it to pass by. And you feel that, right? Like it's like you can't think that I'm just going to muster through this. You're just at the mercy of whatever's going on around you. And you couldn't help but to think that these dear bishops who were in England at this time, who were celebrating today, these courageous martyrs for the truth, despite the political problems they had. I just want to read quickly the life of St. John Fisher and Thomas More. And there's a great movie called A Man for All Seasons, which if you haven't seen it, it's a slow-moving movie. It's an old-fashioned style movie. But boy, it's like sipping a delicious red wine, aged to perfection. You probably won't find a more morally sound and heroic type of man than what St. Thomas More was. He's kind of like the modern-day St. John the Baptist. So it says, in 1530, English King Henry VIII began a campaign to have himself declared head of the church in England in order to divorce Queen Catherine in favor of Anne Boleyn. At the time, Thomas More was Henry's chancellor, his chief statesman and close friend. John Fisher, Henry's former tutor, was the English church's preeminent bishop and scholar. Bishop Fisher publicly decried the king's rejection of the papal decision against annulment, while More quietly retired from public life in order to avoid confrontation. But Henry could abide neither in man's refusal to support his bid to displace the Pope. Bishop John Fisher, was beheaded on June 22nd, 1535. More died in the same manner 13 days later. And today we have the same confrontation welling up in our country with the debate over whether or not public figures should be able to receive the Eucharist. And you hear Jesus chiming in, which tradition has always seen in this phrase, in which Jesus shares, which says, "Do not give what is holy to dogs or throw pearls before swine, lest they trample them underfoot and turn and tear you to pieces." And there are things in which are sacred and holy, in which all of us have that kind of internal demand to ask ourselves, are we in God's grace? Do we have mortal sins in our hearts and minds and souls to concretely be worthy of receiving the Eucharist? And it's such a beautiful way to recognize and venerate that if we're not worthy to receive communion, then we're called to pause, to reconcile ourselves with God and with our church, because the Eucharist is not a rite, it's a gift. And what a beautiful gift it is to be able to receive the body, blood, soul, divinity of Jesus Christ. And it's not for nothing that most of us, most Catholics, do not truly believe in the real presence of Jesus Christ. And so the constant sacrilege that goes on of unworthily receiving the Eucharist is something that's probably one of the most common, the most serious and unconfessed things going on today. And we wonder why our church is where it is, because the specific difference between our Catholic Church and any other Christian proposal has so much to do with taking John 6, if you do not eat my body and drink my blood, you shall not have eternal life. And then you see Jesus talking about the holy things and being worthy to be able to receive those holy things. And it's so good for us to realize that because we can do something doesn't mean necessarily that we should. And to really discern with the Lord the worthy reception of this beautiful sacrament. And the other thing that is so beautiful about the Eucharist is that through the Eucharist, we have this deeper communion with Jesus. And who's truly worthy of even being able to celebrate the Mass or come to daily Mass or to be able to have Eucharistic adoration. And there's such a good thing about the accessibility of the Eucharist, but I think there's also, it can be almost taken to one side of saying, well, it's a right, I deserve it. When really I think that there's a balance that's so good to have of consistent examen of conscience, not to beat ourselves up and to live in it like, oh, I'm a bad person, but to have a healthy way to look out at the Eucharist and to know that what a gift that is. And you see at the eye of the storm right now are these two poles that seemingly are forming in our church leadership of one trying to dispel that the importance of like preparing a heart for the Eucharist, and another just giving you first almost a right to it. And I think that's where some of the confusion can come in today of seeing that. And I think that the heroic nature of like Bishop John Fisher and St. Thomas More teach us that the truth truly sets us free, despite the political ramifications, despite the challenges that could mean in terms of confronting different groups and bodies, that it's always the truth of Jesus Christ that's going to be what's going to separate those who are called and really respond to being saints, and those who will just continue to pander to special interests. And it's for each of us. It's a call to challenge of like, are we willing to stand in the truth of our tradition, to stand in the truth of Jesus in the Eucharist, and to know that the key to our life to get to heaven has everything to do with being able to live in the mercy of God, giving over our mortal sins in exchange for his great mercy. And I think that as Catholics, especially those of us who are so beautifully trained and want to come to the Eucharist every day, that we hear these heroic examples of these saints, and we're called to that same heroic love of Jesus Christ, which obviously has to do with first avoiding the near occasion of sin and mortal sin, and living in a life of grace, love, and heroic charity.